The moment Mara Ellison saw her ex-husband stride through the crystal revolving doors of the Astra Regent Grand, her breath hitched. Not for love, not for longing, but for the bright, electric click of justice slotting into place. She stood near the veined marble concierge desk, a navy pantsuit draped over her like armor. Curls gathered into a low, elegant twist. 7 years had carried her from the girl who wiped tables and cried in bathroom stalls to the woman who wrote policy, signed paychecks, and chose who got to feel important in rooms like this. Apparently, Damon Vance didn't recognize that woman. "Reservation for Vance," he said at the front desk in a voice Mara remembered too well. Smooth lacquer over hollow wood. "Damon Vance, presidential suite, 3 nights." Jonah, the front desk associate, glanced toward Mara. She answered with a barely visible tilt of her head. "Not yet." "Of course, Mr. Vance," Jonah said smoothly, tapping keys. "We're delighted to have you." Behind Damon, the entourage assembled like a small, expensive storm. His wife, Sarah, was 5 years younger than Mara and dressed in the glossy confidence of a woman who believed life loved her back. Damon's sister, Nadine, wore headphones around her neck and disapproval on her face. His brother Connor, a walking impulse purchase, filmed the lobby's kinetic sculpture for his story feed. And then there was Lillian Vance, Damon's mother, whose fur-trimmed wrap in this mild weather wasn't about warmth, but volume. Her gaze moved across the lobby with a kind of weaponized curiosity, searching for flaws she could name out loud. Lillian's eyes landed on Mara. "You there," she called, chin lifting. "With the hair. Our bellhop is taking forever. Be a dear and handle our luggage." Jonah's hands froze on the keyboard. A hostess paused mid-step. Somewhere, a lobby fountain kept breathing out its delicate hush, oblivious. 7 years ago, that sentence would have buckled Mara's knees. 7 years ago, Lillian had stood in Mara's dim apartment and called her delusional for thinking she could be both a mother and a partner to her son. 7 years ago, Damon had handed Mara divorce papers while their baby napped in a thrift store bassinet. 7 years ago, Mara worked 3 jobs and still counted coins at midnight. Today, Mara owned this hotel and 24 more. She took a measured step forward, keeping what she'd once learned to call service distance. Close enough to help, far enough to refuse. "I'm afraid I'm not available for luggage," Mara said in a calm, level voice. "One of our Bell team will be with you right away." "Do you know who we are?" Lillian asked, wielding her name like ID at a private gate. "My son's assistant requested VIP access. We're expecting nothing short of the best." "You'll receive exactly what you deserve," Mara replied, letting the words land with satin softness and steel lining. Damon finally looked up from the tablet where he was signing. His eyes slid over Mara's face, paused for a breath, then skimmed on. No recognition. Maybe she'd changed that much, or maybe he'd never really seen her at all. "Mother, please," Damon said without turning. "Let's not harass the staff." "I'm ensuring value," Lillian huffed. "These boutique places always cut corners." "This isn't a boutique," Mara said pleasantly. "It's a standard-setting property. We treat every guest according to their true character." Lillian's mouth pinched, uncertain whether she'd been complimented or dressed down. Sarah tugged at Damon's sleeve, angling her phone for a shot that caught not only the chandelier, but her cheekbones. Connor framed a video caption, "Presidential vibes." Nadine asked for the Wi-Fi password before she'd even looked up. The elevator carried the family away in mirrored silence, and the lobby seemed to exhale. Jonah turned to Mara, stricken. "Ms. Ellison, You were perfect," Mara said. "Professional, steady. It's why you're here." Elena Park, Mara's COO, appeared at her shoulder with a tablet and the smallest smile. "Guest cards adjusted as requested. Standard access only. They'll discover the executive lounge denial at breakfast." "Good," Mara said. "Let them exhale. Comfort makes the reveal clean." "You could end this tonight," Elena murmured. "Walk up there. Say your name." "Revenge is delicious," Mara said softly, "but it's best served to people who've already convinced themselves they're full." She crossed the lobby toward the private door that led to her office, heels whispering over marble. In the glass, she caught a sliver of herself. Posture straight, eyes bright, mouth set in a line that knew its own value. The Mara from 7 years ago, eyes swollen, body healing, bank app red, felt like a myth told by a stranger. This Mara built payrolls and scholarship funds and daycare centers and break rooms. She could look at a P&L and see where dignity would multiply. Her office watched the city through a wall of glass. The lights below threaded themselves into the shape of a life she'd claimed the hard way. Alina set tea on Mara's desk and brought up the suite camera feeds, purely for security, purely for study. The Vances spilled across the presidential suite, exactly as predicted. Sarah arranging champagne beside peonies, Connor raiding the minibar, Nadine draped on the sofa scrolling, Lillian already placing a call to correct something about dinner that had been flawless. "You actually anticipated they'd book us?" Alina asked, curiosity rounded by admiration. "Not a guarantee," Mara said, "but Damon's assistant follows the same 3 luxury accounts as every nouveau important person in this city. We seeded those posts last month. I didn't bait a trap, I just stocked the pantry." Alina's smile sharpened. "Prepared, not plotting." "There's a difference," Mara said, and thought of the night the difference began. Back then, before the lobbies and the brass plaques and the keynote invitations, Mara lived in a one-bedroom that smelled like old carpet cleanser. Amaya was 3 weeks old, a moon-faced miracle who slept in 3-hour coins that never added up to wealth. Damon stood in the doorway with the papers. Lillian stood behind him like a shadow that made the room smaller. "Be reasonable," Damon said, gesturing vaguely at everything. "My mother says—" "My mother," Mara echoed, empty and aching. Always his mother. Lillian scanned the cheap furniture with visible offense. "You're sweet, dear, but sweetness doesn't scale. Damon married beneath his station, and it's time we correct the record. Sign. We'll make sure you have the basics." Mara had $412 in her account and a newborn who needed everything. She signed because sometimes survival chooses for you. When the door shut, the sound was blunt and final. For a long time, she sat in the dark holding her daughter, counting breaths and possibilities, both too few. The next morning, she showed up at a job she barely had the energy to keep. Night cleaning at the Juniper Lodge on the edge of town. The owner, Delia Cheng, found her scrubbing a tile grout line like it had personally insulted her. "You look like grief," Delia said not unkindly. "And grief makes people either mean or determined. Which one are you?" "I'm trying for determined," Mara said, voice wrecked. "But today I'm just here." Delia poured coffee into a paper cup, set it beside the bucket, then sat on the housekeeping cart like a queen on a throne that rolled. "I started in housekeeping 23 years ago. Now I own this place." "How?" The word fell out of Mara like a child's wish. "I watched," Delia said. "I asked questions. I treated this building like a textbook and everybody in it like a teacher. Then I bet on what I learned. Slowly, precisely. You do that long enough, people call it luck." Delia showed her a ledger, spoke the language of occupancy and ADR and RevPAR, words that felt like footbridges over deep water. The numbers were not magic. They were habits calcified. "Keep cleaning," Delia told her. "But while you clean, study. Notice everything guests complain about. Watch how the front desk bottlenecks at 5:45. Hear how room 3112's AC moans and makes early checkouts. Write it down. When you're ready, bring me a plan. I'll tell you where it leaks." Mara bought a spiral notebook from a drugstore and poured herself into it. Scuffed baseboards that scratched suitcases, pillows that needed better fill, purchase orders that wasted money on brand names guests never noticed. She learned to love 3 a.m. audits and 4 p.m. check-in tides and why Monday felt different in a hotel's bones than Friday ever could. She cleaned rooms and learned balance sheets, nursed the baby, and devoured online lectures from Cornell's hotel school with earbuds in while mopping. When the Juniper's quarterly review came around, Mara quietly suggested a shift pattern that tightened coverage right when lobby lines braided. Delia tried it. Guest scores climbed. Mara proposed swapping a trendy but inconvenient amenity for an actually useful one. Costs dropped and reviews rose. Nothing dramatic. Everything cumulative. The plan she finally showed Delia was 30 pages and a map of the property's little inefficiencies. Delia read without speaking, read penning margins with questions that made the plan stronger. Then she said, "You're ready for a room you don't have to clean." "Front desk?" "Assistant to the GM," Delia corrected. "You need to sit where decisions arrive. It'll feel like standing on a cliff for a while. Get used to the view." The view changed everything. From the desk, she saw patterns no mop bucket could show her, how wedding blocks and sports teams crashed into one another, how the right bell staffer at the right hour was worth 10 marketing campaigns, how an apology delivered like a gift cost nothing and returned loyalty like interest. Word got around. Mara spoke at a small industry breakfast, reluctant and brilliant about why paying housekeepers 20% above market wasn't charity, but strategy. A man introduced himself afterward, Ezra Coleman, tech money old enough to be skeptical and young enough to be curious. "I like your math," he said, not bothering with flattery. "I like your spine more. Show me a property you'd buy if you could." She showed him a 40-room wreck, 3 exits off a highway, the kind of place the internet warned you about. "The bones are good," Mara said, sliding her annotated photos across the cafe table. "The location is misused. The brand is non-existent. The staff is exhausted from being invisible. We fix that. We build a promise and keep it so consistently they start telling the story for us." Ezra smiled like someone hearing his favorite song in a foreign city. "I'll fund the purchase and the renovation. You run it with the values you just preached. One condition." "What?" "You keep control," he said. "No partner gets to turn your people into numbers on a spreadsheet. If I ever try, you fire me." He wired the money. Mara picked paint swatches with a baby strapped to her chest and waterproofed the housekeeping closet and turned a dead breakfast room into a morning ritual that tasted like welcome, not compromise. She printed a single sentence in the employee handbook as a thesis. "Hospitality starts in the break room." It turned out to be less of a slogan and more of a spell. 12 months later, the opening party for the first Astra Regent, a name Mara chose because lines that connect the world deserve royalty, felt less like a ribbon cutting and more like a vow renewal. Guests didn't just book, they returned, and they returned with friends. Staff didn't just stay, they grew. One hotel became 2, 2 to 5, then 15. Ezra introduced her at a conference as the only founder he knew who could tell you how to snake a drain and negotiate a credit facility in the same hour. Through all of it, Damon sent minimum child support checks in silence. Lillian once mailed a card that said, "For the child, may she be smarter than you," and tucked in a 20. Mara used it to buy Amaya a stuffed elephant named Lucky and burned the card in the sink. Now in the present tense of this immaculate lobby, 7 years of work had led to a chance, not to hurt anyone, but to tell the truth with receipts. Alina cleared her throat gently. "Do you ever feel tempted to gloat?" Mara asked. "Sure, I'm human, but gloating is sugar. We are protein. Also, my daughter has a school play at 6. That's a more satisfying audience." They watched a moment more as Lillian rearranged the suite's coffee table because control soothed her, and Sarah angled her chin toward good light. Connor popped another minibar seal. Nadine typed a complaint tweet she didn't send. "Tomorrow," Alina said. "Tomorrow," Mara agreed. Morning came like a silver coin rolling across the city. At 6:03 a.m., 2 key cards flashed red against the executive lounge reader. Damon frowned and tried again. Red. Connor tried. Red. "This is absurd," Connor said, already annoyed at the inconvenience of rules. They descended to the lobby with the aggrieved posture of people unaccustomed to know. Jonah, impeccable behind the desk, met them with hospitality that neither groveled nor bristled. "Good morning, Mr. Vance. How can I assist?" "Our lounge access isn't working," Damon said, stressing like the universe had made a clerical error. "We booked VIP." Jonah glanced at the screen. "You're confirmed for the presidential suite with standard amenities. Executive lounge access is included in our premier package. It's not on this reservation, I'm afraid." "My assistant secured VIP," Damon said, trying on authority. "Fix it." "I can add the package," Jonah said easily. "For your party of 5, it's $2,000 per person for the duration." $10,000? Connor's laugh was short and mean. "For breakfast? For private lounge access, concierge privileges, rooftop spa, late checkout, and "We're not paying that," Damon snapped. "Get me your manager." Jonah's eyes slid once toward the office corridor. The lobby air sharpened, attentive. A guest near the fireplace lowered her newspaper. The fountain kept breathing. Alina stepped out first, then stopped like the overture to a symphony ending on a held note. Behind her, Mara walked into the lobby she designed, wood and glass and light, and felt the room notice. Damon pivoted toward the movement, confusion flaring, then freezing into recognition. And for the first time in many years, the past and present touched hands and did not flinch. His mouth opened. No sound. "Good morning," Mara said, voice warm, posture unbent. "I understand there's confusion about your access." "Mara," he said, small, then louder, as if volume could rewind the tape. "Mara." "Ms. Ellison," she corrected gently. "Mara works for people who've earned it." She turned to Jonah without breaking eye contact. "Thank you. I'll take it from here." Lillian arrived in a rush of perfume and indignation. "Finally," she said, catching sight of Mara and stopping hard enough to rock on her heels. "You." "Mrs. Vance," Mara said, smiling with her teeth hidden. "How lovely to see you in my lobby." Silence did what silence does when truth fills it. It widened, then focused like a lens. "Your lobby?" Lillian asked, voice flattening. "I own the Astra Regent Grand," Mara said pleasantly, "and the rest of the Astra Regent hotels. When you checked in yesterday, you joined my house." Color chased itself across Lillian's face, white to pink to a blotchy, frantic red. Damon looked at the floor like answers might be there. Sarah stared, eyes sharpened with something Mara recognized as respect, or at least shock upgraded. "This is outrageous," Lillian said. "Deception, hospitality," Mara corrected, still smiling. "We provide exactly what's been purchased, nothing less, nothing unearned." Damon tried a laugh that sounded like a cough. "So this, what, is revenge?" "No," Mara said, and the word was soft enough to be tender. "This is accounting." She held their gaze, unhurried, unafraid, the lobby at her back and the city at her feet, and felt the story finally round the last corner toward the light. For a long breath, nobody moved. The fountain kept whispering behind them, and the big clock above the concierge desk ticked on with the patient arrogance of a place that had survived hundreds of checkouts and all manner of human drama. Mara let the silence stretch just far enough for everyone to understand that she was not filling it to make them comfortable. Then she inclined her head toward Jonah and Alina and spoke in the same even tone she used in boardrooms and break rooms alike. "Mr. Vance and party will of course continue to receive everything included in their reservation. The executive lounge and rooftop privileges require the premier package, which is not currently associated with this stay. If you would like to add it, Jonah will process payment. Otherwise, our main restaurant has a beautiful breakfast." Sarah found her voice first. "So you are the owner. All of this is yours." Mara did not look away. "All of it and more. 17 properties operational and 8 in development. The people who run them with me are the reason we lead the market." She glanced at Jonah. "Would you kindly see to the guests waiting to check out?" "Thank you." Lillian pressed forward as if proximity alone could tilt the balance back to the old order. "You were the housekeeping girl." "A nice girl, yes, but a girl with limits. I told my son. I said she will pull him down. She will make him ordinary. We saved him from that life." Her chin lifted. "You should thank me." There were a dozen ways to break that sentence into dust. Mara chose the one that would teach. "I was a cleaner who paid attention and never confused station for potential. You called that delusion. I called it a business plan, and I executed it. We both get to live with our choices." A small crowd had formed at a respectful distance. Travelers pretended to check phones while absorbing everything. Someone near the fireplace raised their camera. Alina stepped almost imperceptibly to block the angle. It was a movement like a door closing softly before a storm could reach inside. Damon cleared his throat. "We are paying guests. We expect the same treatment as everyone else. You are receiving exactly that Mara said. Excellent service within the boundaries of your booking. If you would like more, you may purchase it. If you prefer to leave, we will refund the unused nights and wish you well." What you may not do is insult my staff or assume elevation without cost. Not here. Not anymore. Nadine looked up from her phone long enough to blink at Mara with open curiosity. Wait, you are the ex, the mother of his child, the one Mom said could not keep a schedule or a budget. That is who you are. That is who I was when you met me, Mara said. Then I built a life that did not fit your story. The lobby absorbed the line like a gospel it had been waiting to hear. Sarah stepped closer. Her voice had lost the brittle sweetness it wore like jewelry. I do not know you, but I can see you run this place with care. It is written on the faces of your staff. If what you say is true, then you built this while raising a little girl. That deserves respect. It does, Lillian snapped, but not deference. This hotel will suffer for this attitude. Word travels. It already traveled, Mara said gently. That is why you booked us. Her gaze did not waver. Enjoy your morning. Or do not. Either way, we will be fine. She turned and walked back toward the corridor with Alina. She did not look over her shoulder. Power looks forward because it already knows what is behind it. In her office, the city stretched beneath the glass like a living map. Alina closed the door and exhaled a laugh that trembled with delight. I have watched you negotiate 8-figure contracts and pacify a bridal party that demanded white doves in a no-bird zone. Nothing has been sweeter than that lobby. That was not for sweetness, Mara said, though she allowed herself half a smile. It was for clarity. She poured 2 cups of tea and slid one across the desk. The feeds, please. On the monitor, the presidential suite bloomed into view again. Connor filmed himself ranting about breakfast injustice to an audience that would forget him by lunch. Nadine paced and typed and deleted. Sarah stood by the window with her phone lowered, as if startled by her own reflection. Lillian pointed at fixtures and called the concierge to report imagined deficiencies. Damon sat on the arm of a chair like a man who had just discovered his signature did not count in this building. Alina sipped. He will try to salvage pride. She will escalate. The sister will ask questions. The brother will post. The wife will think. And we will continue operations, Mara said. We have a staff summit at 10, a design review at 1, and a call with the foundation at 4. At 6, I will be in a folding chair in an elementary school auditorium, watching Amaya pretend to be a star. The plan stands whether or not a ghost from my past wants to haunt breakfast. Her phone buzzed. A text from Aunt Ruth about after-school pickup logistics. Another from the head of security linking a short clip recorded by a guest who had captured the scene from across the lobby, already on 2 small local accounts. Alina had flagged it for rapid response and drafted a neutral statement. Mara scanned and nodded. We will not feed it, she said. We will repeat our values and go back to work. If they turn ugly, security escorts them out politely, and we comp nothing. Make sure the team knows. Kind but firm. Nobody apologizes for rules. Alina's smile was bright and a little fierce. I will have pastries from the kitchen sent to the line staff. Everyone loves moral support with butter. By 9:45, the lobby clip had found new branches. A business blogger wrote a quick post about the elegance of boundaries. A finance account compared housekeeping wages at Astra Regent to industry averages and drew conclusions that made Mara's heart warm. A stranger tweeted a photo of the employee daycare at the downtown property and called it sanity in a world that did not know what work looked like for parents. The story that wanted to be gossip kept hitting the scaffolding of a better tale and climbing upward instead of spiraling down. Some stories do that when you do not lie about who you are. At 11, Sarah appeared at the office door alone. Alina met her with a posture that said yes, if safe, no, if not. Sarah's hands were empty. Her eyes were steady. If she becomes hostile, you walk out, Alina said under her breath. Let her in, Mara replied. Sarah stepped inside and did not touch anything. She looked at the city and then at the woman whose name was on the deeds. I owe you 2 words, she said. They are not the ones you might expect. Not I am sorry. I do not apologize for other people. She paused until the air collected around the truth. You won. Mara was quiet a moment. Against whom? Not against us, Sarah said. Against the voice that told you that you were small. Everyone has it. Some of us hire it as a life coach. Some of us marry it. Her mouth quirked without humor. He told me you were messy and needy and that you made him feel trapped. He left out that you were the person who would eventually put your name on skylines. I did not do it to spite anyone, Mara said. I believe you, Sarah said, which is why it worked. She swallowed. I will be honest because it is the only thing that balances a room like this. My marriage is a performance that has stopped selling tickets. I am leaving it, but I am not here for absolution. I only came to say that when you stood in the lobby, you gave me a picture of a life that answers to itself. Sometimes we need a witness as much as we need a plan. Mara felt the accustomed wariness give way to a particular respect reserved for people who walk in own shame and leave with lighter steps. I hope you build something that is yours. Sarah nodded once. If his mother makes trouble, she said, I will not be part of it. Then she left as quietly as she had come. The door had barely clicked shut when Alina slipped back in with a printout. Cancellations from the Vance construction pipeline, she said. Looks like some of their clients saw the clip and did basic research. They do not enjoy entitlement in the morning, apparently. We do not pile on, Mara said. We do not call. We do not gloat. They will draw their own maps. She stood and stretched the stiffness out of her shoulders. How is the team? Proud, Alina said. And protective. Security added an extra guard outside the daycare. The staff has a script. Everyone is steady. Good. Mara closed her laptop. I am going to walk the house. Call me if anything escalates. She took the service corridor instead of the guest elevators because nothing recalibrated a leader like the heartbeat of a back hall. She greeted housekeepers by name and asked if the new carts were turning better on carpet. She stepped into the kitchen and tasted the compote for the breakfast parfaits and asked Chef Len if the seasonal berries were arriving on time. She paused to hold the door for a bell attendant whose load was too wide for his elbow. The building breathed around her, and in return she gave it her attention, which is what real stewardship is when the speeches are over. On the 25th floor, she turned a corner and almost collided with Lillian. The older woman was alone, which made the moment oddly intimate. The anger that had blazed in the morning was damp now, heavy and tired. I lost 2 charity boards this year, Lillian said without preamble. They told me my views were inconsistent with their missions. Imagine that. Me outlived by the times. She looked at the carpet and then up with a shock of candor. I told myself I was guiding my son, that I knew better than he did. Maybe I only knew better how to make people behave in rooms I already understood. Mara did not move to soften it. Control feels like wisdom when it keeps you comfortable. When it stops another person from growing, it is only fear with good shoes. Lillian flinched, but she did not retreat. He was a boy. I was afraid of the life he would have with you. Hard, uneasy, not the country club summer I paid for, with a man who made money in his sleep. I believe protection was love. Protection that erases truth is not love, Mara said. It is just erasure. They stood in the quiet hall for a moment, like people catching their breath after a wave that did not listen to them. Finally, Lillian squared her shoulders. Will you punish him? Will you keep his child from him forever? Mara thought of Amaya with her crooked ponytail and her questions that never stopped at where. My daughter has never been kept from her father, she said. He just never arrived. If someday he becomes the kind of man who shows up without excuses, then we will consider what is best for her. Until then, she is whole. With me, she is whole. Lillian nodded once and turned away. The shoulders that had once carried entitlement like a fur coat looked naked and mortal. She walked down the hall as if the carpet had become a road she did not quite know how to travel. At 2 that afternoon, the clip from the lobby crossed a threshold that the internet understands instinctively. It became a story people used to talk about themselves. A single mother wrote about the job that everybody joked about and how she used that job to pay tuition for a degree that had her name on a door now. A hotel guest posted a note praising Jonah by name for handling a difficult morning with steadiness. A restaurateur commented that public humiliations often sour a city, but that this one had seasoned it instead because the person with the power had not abused it. The narrative did not swirl toward cruelty, it climbed toward competence. It is easier to celebrate when the person who wins remembers the people who set the table. By late afternoon, Damon called to request a meeting. Alina relayed the message with a raised eyebrow. Your call. Mara looked at the clock. 30 minutes before she needed to leave for the school auditorium. I will give him 10 minutes in the bar. Public place. No scenes. He was already there when she arrived. No entourage, no suit jacket, a man without a script. He stood as she did and then seemed to forget what to do with his hands. "Thank you for meeting me." "I will keep it short," Mara said. He did. "I came to say that I am sorry," he began. The words were stiff but real, like a limb that had been in a cast for too long and now tried to bend. "I am sorry for how I left, for believing what made me comfortable, for sending money like it was parenting. I was a coward." "Acknowledgement is not a door with a welcome mat," Mara said. "It is just a map that finally matches the road." "What do you want?" "I want to know if there is any path to being part of my daughter's life. You want to know if your sudden interest will be read as love or as opportunism," Mara said. "I have no interest in supervising your conscience. If you become a man who shows up with consistency, I will not fight what is good for her. Until then, do not knock on a door you have not earned the right to approach." Her eyes softened 1 degree. "She is happy. Do not use your regret to unsettle that." He nodded and swallowed. "I figured as much. For what it is worth, the hotel is beautiful. The staff looks proud. You did what you said you would do when we were 26 and foolish. You made a thing that keeps its promises." Mara let that land. There was a time when she would have stored it like a jewel. Now it felt like a receipt. "Thank you." He stood but hesitated. "One more question. How did you carry it? The work, the baby, the doubt." "I keep thinking there must have been a secret." "There was no secret," Mara said. "There was routine. There was a ledger of favors and a stubborn refusal to make my daughter pay for my heartbreak. There were mentors who lent me spine when mine wobbled. And there was the choice to stop trying to be who you and your mother needed and to become who I needed to respect in the mirror. The rest is just the calendar." He nodded again and left without asking for a hug or a handshake. It was the most adult thing she had ever seen him do. At 6:05, the auditorium lights dimmed, and 100 parents tried to capture a moment and still be inside it. Amaya walked onto the stage as a star made of cardboard and glitter, her smile so bright it needed its own lighting cue. She found her mother in the crowd, because children always do. Mara waved her little wave, the one that had started on a cheap apartment sofa and traveled through every lobby in her life. After the show, they stopped for noodles as a treat. Amaya talked in waterfall sentences about stage fright that felt like bees and how it went away when she saw Mama smiling. She asked if glitter was biodegradable. She asked if the city would ever name a day after their dog, even though they did not have a dog. On the way home, Amaya grew quiet. "Mom," she asked without preface, "do I have a dad I can meet someday?" Mara parked the car before she answered, because some questions deserve stillness. "You have a biological father who is learning very late how to be brave. If he learns well, and if it is good for you, then maybe someday. If not, you are still complete. You are surrounded by people who love you on purpose. That is the best kind of family." Amaya nodded in the solemn way children do when they store truth for later. "Can I have 2 packs of glitter next time instead of 1? "We will negotiate," Mara said, and they both laughed. Back at the hotel, the night manager texted a brief update. The Vance party had requested early checkout. No incident, no raised voices. A luggage cart loaded with designer bags rolled through a lobby where nobody paused to stare. The story had already become a lesson. The lesson was already becoming a rumor. The rumor would become a myth. And myths, in the end, are just instructions disguised as entertainment. Elena called as Mara stood by the window, watching the city blink. "We finished the staff summit," she said. "I told them the whole point was not the clapback. It was the consistency. People are buzzing." "In a good way," Good Mara said. "Send a note to the properties. Remind managers that the clip does not make us heroes. The work does. And tell Chef that the lemon bars he sent to the break room today were illegal because I ate 2. "Illegal lemon bars delivered," she said. "One more thing. The board wants to add 2 employee seats permanently. After today, nobody argued." "We should have done it sooner," Mara said. "But I will take the win if it came by a road I did not expect." She hung up and stood with her forehead against the cool glass for a long minute. The city was a living thing, and her hotels were small organs inside it, useful because they kept clean blood moving. She had always believed that work could be holy when it served people without erasing them. Today had put that belief on a stage without permission. It had not broken under the lights. It had shone. Her phone pulsed with a final message before she set it on the nightstand. It was from Connor of all people, the video guy. It read, "You do not know me, but I was a jerk this morning. I post to feel real, and it never works. Watching you today made me want to learn something that is not content. If you know any good books on hospitality or on being a person who is useful, please send titles. Also, if you have a rule about not replying to idiots, I understand." Mara smiled in spite of herself and sent 3 titles and a short note. "The first chapter is always the hardest. Finish it anyway." She turned off the lamp and the room slipped into a soft darkness, full of the subtle hushes of an expensive building at rest. For a moment she let memory flicker. Damon in a doorway at 26. Lillian in a fur that was actually fear. Delia on a housekeeping cart handing her the keys to a new vocabulary. Ezra at a cafe saying, "Keep control." Alina beside her in every corridor. Amaya on a stage turned into a star by glue and ambition. The whole story rearranged itself into what it had always been under the noise. Not revenge. Alignment. Not triumph over someone. Triumph toward herself. In the lobby, a night auditor began the daily ritual of reconciling numbers that told truths. In the kitchen, someone set tomorrow's dough to rise. On a break room bulletin board, a new sticky note read, "Hospitality starts in the break room," in a housekeeper's looping hand with a heart over the eye. The building breathed in and out. So did Mara. Morning would come with new guests and new frictions and new chances to keep a promise. It always did. And now the people who once called her delusional had seen exactly what a promise looks like when it grows up and puts down roots. The city turned another page. Mara slept like a builder who knows the beams are sound. The clip refused to die, but it changed shape. By the end of the week, it was no longer a spectacle about a wealthy family being corrected in a marble lobby. It had become shorthand. People used to talk about boundaries at work, about pay that dignifies labor, about how success can be quiet until the day you need it to be loud. Guests arrived at Astra Regent with a small, conspiratorial smile, as if they were stepping into a place that had chosen a side and chosen it well. The bookings held. The staff walked a little taller. The city understood, without anyone saying it, that the hotel ran on a constitution you could feel in the air. Mara added nothing to her public statement beyond a single sentence at the end of the internal memo circulated to every property. "We are not in the revenge business. We are in the promise-keeping business." It read like instruction and blessing all at once. Housekeepers taped it in break rooms beside the weekly schedule. Valets memorized it without trying. It sounded like something you would pin over a kitchen sink and let it strengthen you while rinsing out a coffee cup at 4 in the morning. Still, life kept its pace. Construction moved on a midtown site that would become a training center with dorm-style rooms for paid interns from community colleges. The foundation funded another cycle of scholarships for children of hospitality workers. Amaya lost a tooth and sang a solo at school with a bravery that made Mara's throat ache. In the quiet between meetings, Mara sorted receipts the way she always had, old habits refusing to let success make her sloppy. Elena walked into her office one Tuesday with a look that meant something human had come to the door. "Who is it?" Mara asked without glancing up. "Two someones. The brother and the mother, together," Elena said. He asked nicely. She did not ask at all. "What does your heart say?" "That my heart is busy," Mara said, closing the folder. "But let them in. Ezra will call any minute about permits, and I only have so much patience to spend." Connor entered first. The phone that usually lived in his hand was nowhere visible. Lillian followed, perfume and posture both turned down from their morning settings. The effect was not humility, exactly, but distance from the old performance. They sat because Elena pointed at the chairs and remained standing behind them with gentle alertness. "I will be direct," Lillian said, hands laced. When a person arrives at a moment when her influence has outlived its usefulness, she can pretend the world is wrong, or she can change. I am trying to change. Badly, but I am trying. Her mouth thinned at the corners. I told a boy to leave a woman who scared me because she was bigger than my imagination. I called that guidance. It was fear. It ruined things that did not belong to me. Everything after that is a consequence I earned. Mara did not rush into the space with condiment forgiveness. She waited long enough to know Lillian could stand on her own words. "Thank you for saying the quiet parts aloud," she said. "What do you need from me?" Advice, Lillian said, surprising herself. I have an energy I do not know where to put now that I cannot spend it controlling my family. You seem to direct effort in ways that build rather than break. Where does a woman like me put her hands? Mara thought of Delia teaching her how to angle a mop so she wouldn't wreck her wrists, and how every job becomes a metaphor if you stare at it long enough. Put them where someone else's work gets lighter, she said. When you feel the urge to direct, ask a question instead. When you feel the urge to decorate the truth, clean something. Start with your own mess. Then try a room that is not yours. Lillian's eyes glossed with a dampness she refused to dignify as tears. I thought you would flay me. That would make a headline, Mara said, but it would not make tomorrow better. Connor leaned forward with elbows on his knees. I got a job, he blurted, as if the sentence would explode if it stayed in him any longer. Not filming myself. Front desk at a chain by the airport. It is not cool. It is good. There is a ledger at the end of the day, and it either balances or it does not. I like that. I like greeting the van driver by name and knowing where we keep toothbrushes for travelers who forgot theirs. I like the 3 a.m. lobby full of tired nurses and theater crews. The world is real there. It will stay real if you let it be, Mara said. Proud is allowed. Performative is banned. There is a difference. He nodded quickly like a kid who just learned a word he had been trying to use for years. They stood to go. At the door, Lillian turned, hands unclasped now. I will not ask about seeing the child. I know my place. If the day ever comes when that is good for her, I will be the calmest person in the room. If it does not, I will live with that, and it will be right. She left without waiting for absolution, the only way to leave when you are serious. After they were gone, Alina sank into the chair and whistled low. When a matriarch asked for advice, winter just ended somewhere, she said. Or she is tired of the cold, Mara replied. Keep records of everything that touches our staff, she added, pivoting without warning. If this story is going to be used as a torch, I want our people's names in the light, not just mine. The call from Ezra came as predicted. He was one of those investors you only meet once if you are not careful, because he offers more than money. He offers a mirror. You have built a company that makes virtue look efficient, he said without greeting. The city will love that until you deny their cousin a comped upgrade. Are you ready to be resented by those who cheer you? They already resent us, Mara said, just not for the reasons they think. We pay housekeepers what they are worth and call that fair. They call it radical until their room smells like sunshine, and they sleep 8 uninterrupted hours. Then they call it obvious. Ezra laughed, rich and delighted. Good. Also, do not grow faster than your training can catch. Scale is a liar if culture cannot keep up. I will die before I let this culture hollow out, Mara said. It came out fiercer than she intended. Ezra hummed. Make sure you also live for it, he said, and hung up in the way of people who have said enough. 3 months later, the training center opened in a building that used to be a storage warehouse, its windows bricked up by a landlord who did not trust light. They reopened the windows and flooded the place with sun and the noise of possibility. Interns arrived with plastic suitcases and questions written on their faces. Some had never stayed in a hotel they did not clean. They spent mornings in classrooms learning why a check-in with eye contact mattered more than a script. They spent afternoons shadowing housekeepers who taught them the choreography nobody notices when a room goes from used to ready. In the evenings, they sat on the loading dock and compared the languages their mothers had taught them to worry in, and the languages work was teaching them to breathe in. Mara visited every week. She taught a session called How to Read a P&L Without Selling Your Soul. She told stories about nights she slept on office couches between a midnight plumbing leak and a 6 a.m. vendor call. She introduced the scholarship that bears Delia's name and watched 3 interns cry quietly into paper cups of coffee because somebody had finally said, "Your ambition is welcome here," without adding as long as it fits in this box. Damon appeared on the edge of that world not as a client or a supplicant or a ghost, but as a contractor. The demolition crew Astra hired for the annex had a foreman who called him the new guy who works like he has something to prove. He wore steel-toed boots like a promise and kept his head down. When Mara toured the site, she looked through the chain-link fence and recognized the angle of his shoulders. He looked up halfway through her inspection. Neither pretended they had not seen each other. He approached without swagger. That was new. Training center looks solid, he said. Good bones. It does, she answered. It will become a place that changes the kind of stories families tell themselves about what is possible. He cleared his throat. I am learning how to build things I do not own. It is different than pretending to own things I did not build. It will make you durable, she said. He nodded once in the way of men who have learned not to use gratitude as an audition. The city offered its own tests. A water main burst on a Saturday, and the Regent lost pressure for 6 hours. Guests were nervous and irritated. Staff moved like a ballet performed in sensible shoes. Maintenance coordinated with the city. Housekeeping prepped bottled water and extra linens. Front desk handed out comped passes to a partner gym where guests could shower. The manager walked the line and spoke like a metronome. We see you. We have you. We will make this right. When the pressure returned, the lobby applauded without anyone starting it. Mara stood in the service corridor, leaned her head against a cool concrete wall, and let herself cry once, quietly for 2 full minutes. Then she washed her face in the mop sink and walked back out. A letter arrived on thick paper sometime in the middle of that season. The return address was a small law office near the river. Inside, a brief hand wrote what a voice could not. I am divorcing your son, it read. I am choosing a life that does not require me to be cruel to feel important. Thank you for the example. It was signed by Sarah with a new last name. The old one struck through so lightly you could still read it and remember what she was walking away from. Mara folded the letter and placed it in a drawer where she kept evidence that the world sometimes listens. She did not need it to validate her choices, but she respected it as proof that models matter, that seeing a woman answer to herself can give another woman the blueprints she needs. Amaya's questions advanced with her age. Do people who hurt others know they are hurting them, or do they think it is love? She asked on a Tuesday, when the rain stuck itself to the windows and refused to move on. Both, Mara said. Sometimes they think control is care because control keeps them from being afraid. Sometimes they know it is hurt and they enjoy the power. Your job is to learn the difference fast and build your house on ground where you can sleep. Do I have to forgive people to be free? Amaya asked next. You have to let them stop renting space in your head, Mara replied. That is a kind of forgiveness, but it does not require you to give them a key. At year's end, the board met in a room with a long table and no place to hide. Alina presented numbers that sparkled in the right places and were sober where they needed to be. Ezra dialed in and said as few words as possible. 2 employees sat at the table as voting members for the first time. One was a housekeeper who had learned English in break rooms and now taught new hires how to advocate for their backs and their schedules. The other was a line cook whose spreadsheets were cleaner than some bankers Mara had met. They argued respectfully about whether to expand to a coastal city that would love the brand but punish any misstep with headlines. They chose yes, and they chose slowly, with a half-step-at-a-time plan that made the marketing executive sigh and made the night auditors nod. It was the right kind of yes. The morning after the meeting, Mara walked past the concierge and saw Lillian again. She had no entourage and no fur. She held a half sheet of paper like a talisman. It was a volunteer roster for a shelter opening 2 blocks over. A kitchen needed hands. A lobby needed a grandmother who knew how to make people behave without breaking them. She lifted the paper an inch in Mara's direction. I took your advice, she said. I am putting my hands where the work is. I hope the soup tastes like humility and good stock, Mara said. It does, Lillian replied, and allowed herself a laugh that did not ask permission. As winter made its slow bargain with spring, the Regent hosted a conference about ethical hospitality. Panelists spoke about wages, about green roofs that made the planet less angry, about daycare rooms full of stickers and naps that made the workforce less desperate. The final session was Mara's. She looked out at a room full of operators with the power to treat people like units, or like humans, and began without a slide deck. We turned a lobby moment into a mirror, she said. If you liked what you saw, make sure your staff would say the same thing about you on a day without cameras. If you did not like what you saw, build a place where your policies are more interesting than your punishments. Afterward, in the quieter hum of people collecting tote bags and promising to email, Sarah approached wearing a gray suit that looked earned rather than curated. She extended a hand. I am learning to sign my own name again, she said. It feels heavier and better. I brought you something. She handed over a thin book filled with blank pages, except for one sentence on the inside cover. For the next woman who needs a witness. Mara tucked the book under her arm like a message she would deliver later. She thought about how stories change when you stop casting yourself as the one who needs revenge and start writing yourself as the one who keeps showing up. It felt like home. It always had, she realized, even when she lived in a borrowed apartment with a crib that squeaked. On a bright day that remembered clouds, the training center graduated its first cohort. They stood in a line in slacks they had saved for, wearing name tags that would soon sit on uniforms instead of lanyards. Delia's daughter came to hand out certificates and tell a story about her mother laughing in a hallway with a young cleaner who did not yet understand how the future would love her. Mara shook hands and hugged where hugs were wanted. When it was over, she sat on the back steps with Alina and split a granola bar because leaders forget to pack snacks just like everyone else. You realize, Alina said, that the day you were supposed to fall apart in the lobby became the day the company decided what it would be when you are not in the room. They built themselves around the choice you made. Mara thought of the memo tacked to break room corkboards, smudged with fingerprints and coffee steam. We are not in the revenge business. We are in the promise-keeping business. I did not write it for them, she said. I wrote it for myself and let them overhear. Then she laughed, put her head on Alina's shoulder for exactly 5 seconds, stood and went back to work because there were rooms to open and a city to greet and a little girl to pick up by 6 from a science club, learning how to build bridges out of popsicle sticks and stubbornness. On the way home, Amaya said, Mom, what is the opposite of a secret? A story you tell on purpose, Mara answered. Then tell me mine. Mara did in a voice that would not tremble for anyone, about a hallway and a yes, in a world that did not know how ready it was for a woman who built her life like a good hotel. Solid beams, soft sheets, doors that close properly, windows that open, a lobby that welcomes without pretending to be smaller than it is, a roof that remembers rain, and a staff that remembers names. Amaya listened with her head against the window and smiled at her reflection as if she recognized the protagonist. The coastal property took 2 years because anything worth doing near the ocean takes longer. Salt wants to own your metal and wind wants to test your patience. The Meridian Tide opened in a city that loved to bless and gossip in the same breath. It sat on a bluff where gulls drew punctuation against a sky that made visitors believe in rest. The lobby was all light and honest lines. The carpets had the kind of pattern that hid sand but welcomed bare feet. The roof carried gardens that held stormwater the way good memories hold grief without letting it drown you. On opening morning, the mayor said the obligatory words about jobs and tax base. A choir of teenagers sang a song about boats that was older than any of them, and still fresh. Mara took the podium last. She did not mention the lobby clip because myth had already done its work. She told a story about Delia and the cadence of a cartwheel and the smell of lemon oil in the 15th floor corridor of a downtown property when everything else was falling apart in her life. But the floor gleamed. The applause sounded like gratitude and electricity. Guests booked out the month in an hour. Instagram discovered the staircase and set about turning it into a shrine. The team reminded the staircase gently that it was also for walking. Staff adjusted their gait to the building's rhythms. In the first week, a toddler painted a silent mural on a guest room wall with sunscreen and shame. Housekeeping laughed, not cruelly, and had it cleaned by check-in with a story they would tell for years. In the second week, a storm marched in square-shouldered from the horizon faster than the forecast promised. By noon, the sky had gone the color of old pewter. By 2, the wind was an argument. By 3, the mayor declared an advisory. The tide became a shelter in everything but name. Families dragged carrier bags full of medication and papers into the ballroom, where the chandeliers looked strangely brave. Pets in carriers that insisted on being heard joined people at tables lined with extension cords and the smell of soup. The building made a noise Mara loved most of all, the hush of strangers becoming neighbors because the day demanded it. She moved the way she always did when reality showed up with teeth. She checked water reserves. She verified backup power. She told kitchen to cook like they would never see another delivery van and not to worry about food cost because dignity comes first and spreadsheets can figure themselves out later. She walked room to room and said the sentence that turns panic into plan. We are with you. Stay where we can find you. At dusk, the glass shuddered once under a gust that sounded like the word now, and the ballroom let out a single collective exhale. The doors held. The lights flickered and steadied. Someone started singing and meant it. Mara stood beside Alina near the service entrance and felt her phone vibrate. A text from Jonah at the downtown property. You taught us to treat weather like a guest. We are doing that. We are fine. Another from an unknown number arrived before she could reply. We are in your ballroom. We had nowhere else. Thank you. It signed itself with a single initial and a last name she knew too well. L. Vance. She scanned the room and saw her near the far wall, a woman with a blanket draped around her shoulders, hair pulled back into a bun that had given up on being perfect, hands busy separating crackers into small, useful piles. Lillian looked up as if she had felt the attention travel across the room like heat. She did not get up or wave in a way that would make herself the center of a scene. She just nodded once and went back to making a kid laugh by arranging two saltines like a crooked little house. Sarah appeared hours later carrying a stack of coloring books she had snagged from a drugstore on her way over when the advisory hit. She saw Mara and let her eyes say everything that did not need words. I am here. I will stack chairs if you tell me to. She found a corner with mothers who were trying to spin patience from a storm and joined them as if it were the most natural thing in the world to teach a child to make paper boats while the building groaned. It was. Connor rolled carts from the banquet storage without being asked and learned the cadence of distribution. He did not film. He asked the chef if there were more vegetarian options and learned to scoop lentils onto plates with a grace that would have made his old audience write heart emojis if they had seen, which they did not, because some work gets to be private and holy. Near midnight, after the worst had passed and the building settled into a listening quiet, Mara stepped into a service stairwell to call Amaya. She expected sleep-muddled hellos. Instead, she heard quick breathing and the high energy of a child excited by weather and responsible adults. Aunt Ruth says storms are like dragons and roofs are shields, Amaya said. Did your shield work? Perfectly, Mara said. The dragon is bored with us. Then tell it we are not a story worth chasing, Amaya said. Come home when the morning tells you it is safe. I saved the last lemon cookie for you. Mara smiled into the dark stairwell. Save me half. Give the other half to Aunt Ruth for bravery. When morning unfolded the edges of the sky like a person testing a healed wound, the tide opened its big windows and let the ocean prove itself again as friend. The ballroom became a brunch hall. The kitchen poured coffee into cups like forgiveness. Guests handed in notes with room numbers and compliments for staff by name. The city's power grid remembered itself. The hotel let the generators take a nap. Children put their paper boats onto puddles that believed, for an hour, that they were lakes. Lillian walked over to Mara without accompaniment. Her shoes squeaked a little on the damp floor. You ran this place last night like a temple, she said. Your staff did not look over to check whether you approved before deciding to be kind. That is leadership. People will stick around for that. They will bring their sisters to work here for that. You were here stacking crackers into architecture, Mara said. That looked like leadership to the people whose kids were crying. It looked like penance, Lillian replied. But I will take leadership if you offer. I do not need to be forgiven. I just need to be useful. A person does not become small by choosing usefulness, Mara said. She surprised herself by touching Lillian's arm briefly, the way you steady someone on a step. Thank you for coming. It mattered. Sarah crossed to them, carrying a tray of tea like an offering in a lesser religion. She handed the cups around and stood shoulder to shoulder with them, the three women looking out over a room full of people who had slept under the same breath for a night and were now pretending they had not. There was no ceremony and no speech. There was a shared quiet that recognized what last night had done to everyone's story. That afternoon, when the brunch plates had been cleared and the ballroom smelled like polish instead of panic, Damon arrived in a truck with a crew and a clipboard. They were there to secure a section of siding the wind had worried loose. He stood on a lift in a harness and worked neatly without looking to see if anyone noticed he knew how. He came down and found Mara, because standing in a room with a woman you had wronged and saying nothing forever is not always the bravest option. You built a harbor, he said. I am learning to build walls that do not hide and roofs that do not lie. I do not expect you to clap. I just wanted to say it out loud where I could not take it back. Words are better when they are backed by weeks, Mara said. But sometimes saying a thing into a room makes you accountable to the room. Considerate said. He nodded, squinting into sunlight that had decided to be generous again. Tell Amaya, he started and stopped, because his old impulses were still loud. Tell her nothing, he corrected gently. I will become someone worth her knowing, and she can come find me or not. That is not my decision anymore. That evening, the Tide lobby looked like itself again. Someone tuned a piano without asking, and then left it perfectly quiet. The front desk checked in road-weary linemen, the kind of guests who make a lobby feel like a Western and a church at once. Mara sat on a soft chair near the window, with her shoes off under her and her phone face down, while the ocean practiced its lines. Alina dropped into the seat beside her like a falling cat. I have news, Alina said, lifting an eyebrow. If it is about a budget, save it for Monday, Mara replied. Better. The mayor called. She wants to declare a day next month to honor the hotel's role during storms. She asked what to call it. I told her to skip your name and call it Promise Day because that is what we kept. She said yes. Mara laughed in the quiet way of tired people who love what tired bought them. The only problem with Promise Day is that it happens every day, she said. Then the plaque will simply be late to the party, Alina said. She stretched her legs, sighed, and looked over. Do you ever let yourself have the last word? Only when the work is done, Mara said. The work did not end. Not that month and not the ones after. The Tide turned into a place evacuees chose without thinking when storms drew maps without asking permission. The training center sent its second cohort across the country with resumes in their hands and hotel families waiting to welcome them. The downtown property piloted a profit-sharing model that made the accountants nervous in the night shift grin. Sarah launched a small firm that helped women untangle their finances and call that freedom rather than crisis. Connor moved from front desk to night audit and discovered the joy of balancing a day that had tried to run away. Lillian ran the weekend soup schedule at the shelter and stopped telling people where to sit, as if she could move their deficit around by arranging chairs. Damon showed up to job sites on time and left on time and paid his rent and tried not to narrate his growth like a man seeking applause. If there was redemption in any of that, it came from repetition rather than climax. 2 years later, the 25th Hotel opened on a block where Mara had once walked with a stroller and a stack of coupons, praying the bus would not be late. The Meridian Crest had a library with a plaque Amaya helped wordsmith. For every kid who wants to build the room they are standing in. The press wanted a fresh angle and kept trying to call the lobby incident the origin story. Mara smiled politely and told them no. The origin story was a woman on a housekeeping card handing another woman an extra set of sheets and a sentence. Pay attention. The rest is logistics. Ezra flew in and hugged her like a father and a friend without making either awkward. He whispered, You did this the slow, hard way, and that is why it will outlive your name. She believed him. She had designed the company on purpose to survive her, not because she was morbid, but because she wanted the people who called the Meridian their professional home to be able to introduce themselves proudly, long after she stopped walking lobbies at midnight. At the reception that followed, Jonah introduced the new front desk manager, a woman who started as a housekeeper, learned PMS systems in a hurry, and could persuade a printer to behave with a tone of voice and a screwdriver. Alina danced with the culinary director in a corner because competence should also look like joy once in a while. Amaya gave a short speech with less shake in her voice than her mother had the first time she faced a board. The room clapped as if they had all raised the child together, which in a way they had. Near the end of the evening, when the photographers had become less hungry and the donors had become more affectionate, a familiar trio lingered near the back. Lillian wearing a dress that looked like it could volunteer at a shelter without crying about it. Connor with a posture that did not ask to be seen and got seen anyway. Sarah, whose smile had no permission slips left to sign. Damon was not there, and that seemed accurate. Some stories you honor by letting them be elsewhere. They approached with no neediness in their faces. Lillian spoke first. I have learned to be quiet when applause starts because it is not my song. but I wanted to say a sentence into this room and then leave before anyone could clap for me. I am glad the boy did not marry the woman I made him marry. I am glad the woman he left built a city inside a city and let us move into it, one kindness at a time. She turned and left immediately, like someone keeping a vow. People watched her go and did not know why their throats tightened. Sarah hugged Mara briefly. My work is small compared to yours, she said. No work that changes a budget and a story is small, Mara replied. Do it for 10 years, and it will look like a skyline. Connor shook Mara's hand with the awkwardness of a man who has stopped pretending to be effortless. I close the books every night, he said. It makes me feel like I am real. Thank you for the reading list and the shove. Mara lifted her glass. To closing the books. To opening rooms. To learning the difference between a spectacle and a standard. Later, much later, when the building had quieted and the night manager had taken the desk and the dishwasher had finished its final hiss and the security guard had walked his third loop, Mara slipped onto the roof with a blanket and her phone. She texted Aunt Ruth a picture of the city and asked what time Amaya's science fair started tomorrow. She texted the head of maintenance a thank you for the storm shutters that had saved them last month. She texted herself a note that simply read, add more chairs to library. Kids prefer floor, but chairs signal intention. Wind moved across the roof in a way that felt like a father who approves. She thought about how the opposite of a secret is a story you tell on purpose, how the opposite of revenge is structure, how the opposite of small is not big but honest. She had built honest structures to hold other people's stories. She had learned to let go of characters who did not belong in her chapters. She had accepted that the last word is not always a sentence in a lobby, but sometimes a building that breathes and a child who sleeps without fear that the lights will go out. Downstairs in the 25th lobby of a life she had wired herself to withstand both joy and weather, a housekeeper pinned a new note beside the schedule. Promise day is every day, it said in the same looping hand that had once written hospitality starts in the break room. Someone added a small heart over the I. Someone else underlined day twice as if to remind time who it was talking to. Mara pulled the blanket around her shoulders and let the night put its cool hand on her face. In the morning, she would make lunches and send emails and say names and solve problems and approve overtime and read an essay about bridges made of popsicle sticks and stubbornness. In the evening, she would sit in a gym that smelled like dust and triumph and watch her daughter explain tensile strength to a judge with the same calm a woman once used to explain boundaries in a lobby. If anyone tried to call that revenge, she would smile and correct them. Promise keeping, she would say. We just do it publicly now. The city kept breathing, the ocean kept practicing, the hotels kept their promises, and the woman who had been invisible when someone needed a bellhop kept building rooms where nobody had to ask whose name was on the deed to be treated like they belonged.